It had, however, been impossible for her mother to refuse Ralph Piran. He was quite presentable, although not of the same class as the Earl. His father had been a captain of a ship, and this meant he was engrossed with the sea from the moment he was born. His mother had been the daughter of a solicitor, who had taught his grandson everything he himself knew about money, and as soon as Ralph could think, he was determined to be rich. He had a very shrewd brain, and by the time he was 25, he had accumulated an income which was the envy of his contemporaries. He soon decided that his friends and acquaintances were not good enough for him. He wanted to shine in the social world, as well as among those who admired his business prowess, and when by chance he met the Countess of Walcott, she was the answer to many of the ambitions that had driven him since he had left school. The Countess was extremely unhappy after her husband's death, but that did not deter Ralph Piran. If riches could make her happy, that was what he was prepared to give her. He also wanted a son who would carry on his ever-expanding business, but here, however, he was disappointed. But it gave him some satisfaction that Lolita at 17 was outstandingly beautiful, and he could say so to those he met in the business world. "I must introduce you to my stepdaughter, Lady Lolita Vernon." This year Lolita was 18, and he was determined that the social world should help him celebrate the occasion. He had already bought a large and impressive house in Berkeley Square, and he was planning a coming-out ball for Lolita. He was determined it would be more sensational than any other ball given throughout the season. Then, at the end of April, when her mother was making all the necessary arrangements for Lolita to be presented at court, she suffered a stroke. Not even the doctors could explain why it had happened. The stroke sent her into a coma, from which the most skilled and the most expensive of the medical practitioners could not rouse her. This, of course, upset the plans for Lolita as a debutante, as it was quite impossible for her to stage a ball in the same house where her mother lay unconscious. It also meant that Ralph Piran had to find hostesses amongst his wife's friends who would chaperone Lolita when she appeared in public. He was determined that she should continue with her season, as it helped him not only socially, but in his business. It was still considered vulgar by the social hostesses for a gentleman to be in trade, and Ralph Piran was determined to be accepted. He was rich enough, he believed, to buy himself a position in the social world, which he was so determined to achieve. Apart from his money, his greatest asset was his stepdaughter. He himself was actually quite presentable, being tall, dark-haired, and good-looking. Dressed by the most expensive tailors in London, he was able to mingle with members of White's Club and Boodle's without anyone questioning why he was amongst them. It was, however, a different problem when it came to invitations. A large number of social hostesses had been very fond of the Countess of Walcott. Distressed by her illness, they had invited Lolita to luncheon, and dinner and a ball when they gave one, but they did not invite her stepfather. It made him angry, but he kept his feelings to himself, and he made sure, when it was at all possible, that he was at parties where among the other guests were the hostesses who had barred their doors to him. Lolita was well aware of the presents which passed from her stepfather to the mothers of her friends, and she knew they could not afford to offer such generous hospitality unless, to put it bluntly, it was subsidized. Ralph Piran was exceedingly jealous, and by the end of May he had attended a number of balls to which he would not have received an invitation earlier in the year. He got what he wanted cleverly and tactfully. Men clapped him on the back and told him he was a good fellow. At the same time, they borrowed £1,000 from him, and he gave it to them willingly. He was not so foolish, however, as to neglect his business because of his social ambitions. He was in the middle of pulling off a deal that would make him the owner of a whole fishing fleet, which he had always wanted to buy. It was, however, such an expensive purchase that he was obliged to accept help from some of his friends, who were as interested as he was in multiplying their money and increasing the number of ships they possessed. Murdock Tanner had for some years been the most important and most successful entrepreneur in the shipping industry.